The rainforest holds its breath at 2:37 a.m. Heat presses against the skin, wet and heavy, while insects stitch the dark with a steady hum and distant gunfire pops like dry bamboo. The canopy swallows the moon and the river turns black as oil. Every sound feels closer than it is, and every shadow looks like a hand reaching for the rotor arc. Chief Warrant Officer 2 Avery Hawkwalker sits left seat as pilot in command of a 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, MH-60M. Her crew is lean. A younger pilot on the right, and a crew chief working the cabin with quiet hands. Inside the cockpit, the glow is soft and green. Checklists already folded into muscle memory. She breathes in for 4, out for 4, and keeps her voice even on the intercom. The task sounds simple on paper. A Delta Force element needs a ride out. Nothing more. Say the clipped updates that arrive in broken bursts through terrain that kills line of sight. The tone is cool, almost bored, as if the aircraft is a taxi and the pilots are only wheels and fuel. Just the ride hangs in the air like mist, and it lands on Walker's shoulders without leaving a mark. Constraints tighten around the plan. The approach will be nap of the earth along the river to keep the trees between the aircraft and the guns. Marking will be clean and quiet. Infrared strobe first. Laser talk on only when called. Red smoke held for short final to read the wind. Wheels down will not exceed 2 minutes. Because time on the ground is how helicopters die. Systems shape the choices. GPS is degraded under the canopy. So the crew leans on the embedded GPS and inertial system for primary navigation and the radar altimeter for truth at 40 feet. Communications are masked by jungle and terrain. So, intercom discipline matters more than volume. The words pilot in command, pilot, and crew chief are not titles tonight. They are lanes that keep fear from spreading. The river bends ahead like a dark spine, and the aircraft hums with restrained power. The younger pilot shifts tight with nerves. The crew chief finishes one last strap check, and the cabin returns to stillness. Walker feels the weight of being underestimated and lets it pass through her. The job is set. The boundaries are clear, and she holds the line with quiet, patient control. The cockpit settles into a quiet rhythm as Avery Hawkwalker works through tight loops that look like habit and feel like intention. She sets the embedded GPS and inertial system as primary because GPS is degraded under the canopy, then cross-checks the radar altimeter against her mental picture of the riverbanks. Fuel is confirmed against distance and contingencies. And she runs the math for power margin with a full litter load. Nothing looks heroic, yet every touch moves the aircraft closer to certainty. She dials in the radar altimeter bug for low flight and speaks in short, calm phrases that keep the intercom clean. Flare gates are sketched on the kneeboard using the river bend as visual anchors, with altitude cues that stack from 20 feet to the point of wheels on mud. Abort gates are marked with simple triggers, like drift beyond a tree line or torque outside limits. A secondary egress is penciled to the far bank in case the first path collapses. Walker lowers the night vision goggle gain until the grain calms and the shadows stop swimming. Breathing falls into a 4/4 cadence that steadies hands and voice, and the younger pilot unconsciously mirrors it. The crew chief watches her wrists more than her words and nods as muscle memory takes over. Each checklist line sounds like a small click that locks fear outside the glass. External coordination stays disciplined and plain. Ground forces will mark with infrared strobe when called, and laser talk on will be withheld until the aircraft is within a minute to prevent extra light in the goggles. Red smoke is reserved for short final to read the wind, not to find the zone. Wheels down is capped at 2 minutes, with the clock treated like another enemy that never sleeps. Inside the cabin, small tells begin to stack. The crew chief secures litters and straps, then taps the cabin floor once when ready. A gesture the team has learned to read without words. The pilot relaxes his shoulders as the plan tightens around clear roles. Walker remains the center of gravity. Not louder, just steadier. A quiet professional who turns a night of unknowns into a map that can be flown. The river slides past like a strip of ink, while the MH-60M holds nap of the Earth at 40 to 60 feet by radar altimeter. Trees lean over the water and swallow sound, giving the aircraft the terrain masking it needs. The pilot in command keeps the nose aligned with the current and trims out the small shivers that ride the blades. The crew moves as one, quiet and busy without rushing. They settle into a hold near the casualty collection point, per the ground force commander. The reminder lands again that they are not shooters and not here to hunt. They are the ride that shows up, waits in the dark, and leaves on time. The feeling is plain and a little sour, but it does not change the job. Inside the cockpit, the light is a soft green that makes edges gentle and instruments clear. The crew chief checks litters, straps, and aid bags, then secures the cabin floor for a quick load. The pilot reviews the landing zone brief one more time and touches each line with a fingertip. The pilot in command watches the little lines of leaves on the water to read wind for short final. Marking and signals stay clean. Infrared strobe will come first on request, and laser talk on will wait until they are inside the last minute to avoid extra light in the goggles. Red smoke is saved for the last seconds to read wind and nothing else. Wheels will touch for no longer than 2 minutes, and every heartbeat on the ground counts double. Rolls remain exact because exact is safe. Pilot in command calls the flow. Pilot backs up instruments and radios. Crew chief owns the cabin and the view out the doors. The aircraft keeps to the river like a shadow that breathes. Walker notes the edge of being kept outside the center and lets the feeling pass, reminding herself that they are only the ride until the world forces a different answer. The plan unravels in a rush of light and noise the moment the approach lane opens. Tracer streams from PKM and RPK rake the treetops, cutting red lines along the edge of the canopy. Bursts come in uneven waves, short, then long, like a metronome that wants to break time. The primary landing zone is sealed before the wheels can even think about mud. Radio calls shear off against the terrain as line of sight collapses under the dense green. Fragments of updates survive through the satellite path, clipped and delayed enough to hurt. The marking plan stays locked down to protect the force, with infrared strobe and laser talk on held until the aircraft is inside the last minute. The clock keeps moving even when words do not. Inside the MH-60M, the cockpit gives a brief master caution ping as vibration rises with the low-level bumps. The pilot in command holds attitude and radar altimeters steady, riding the river contour like a rail. The younger pilot tightens across the shoulders, eyes fixed on instruments while hands hover just off the controls. The crew chief works the night vision goggles and calls threats by bearing and behavior, not by fear. Another volley walks across the canopy and chews at the imagined final path to the zone. Medical updates push the sense of urgency higher. Urgent surgical, with minutes bleeding away in a place that eats minutes. The gap between the casualty collection point and the primary landing zone is now a corridor of risk, not a route. No amount of courage makes that distance safe, while guns own the angles. The conclusion lands with the weight of procedure and experience. The primary landing zone is not tenable for a direct set down. Not with the current pattern of fire, and not with a patient who cannot wait. Terrain masking is the only shield left, and the river is the only shield that moves with them. The next move will need a different place to land and a different way to get there. Because the plan has failed, but the mission has not. The chaos blooms outside. But inside the MH-60M, the work stays simple and exact. Avery Hawkwalker holds attitude with small, steady inputs, and keeps the radar altimeter riding the river at safe low level. She trims out tiny yaws with crisp pedal work and uses power only as needed to guard the margin. Breathing settles into 4 in and 4 out. A metronome for the whole crew. Terrain does the heavy lifting when used well. Walker hugs the inside of bends to keep the canopy between the aircraft and the guns, letting the river handle most of the masking. She chooses headings that shorten exposure to known angles rather than chase every threat with the doors. The goal is not to fight the jungle, but to let it hide them. The crew chief becomes both shield and sensor. He leans his body to cover the pilot while scanning through night vision goggles, filtering what he sees into clean. Short callouts, bearings, movement, and probable firing positions are given without drama or filler. His words are another instrument, and Walker treats them that way. Crew resource management keeps fear from spreading. The pilot in command drives the aircraft and the timeline. The pilot backs up instruments, runs radios, and tracks fuel and torque. The crew chief owns the cabin, the litters, the straps, and the picture outside the doors. Discipline shapes the trigger of force. Door guns stay quiet because line of sight is narrow, and foliage can turn return fire into guesswork. Walker values timing over noise and masking over muzzle flashes. A choice that saves seconds and lives in a place that eats both. She guides the aircraft to arrive, when bursts pause, not while they rise. Every action looks ordinary, and that is the point. The aircraft flies like a straight line drawn through bad options. Steady and unafraid. Inside, and stay low. Voices stay even. And the radar altimeter number never surprises. The mission is still in trouble, but the crew is not. The calm becomes a bridge to the next move. Walker senses the plan bending toward a change and prepares without announcing it. Adjusting gain, checking abort gates, and rehearsing egress in her head. Nothing heroic appears on the surface. Underneath, a master craftsperson sets the stage to choose a new path and make it feel inevitable. She sees the math turn against the plan. The patient is urgent, surgical, and minutes are falling away. The primary landing zone is locked by guns from 2 angles, and the gap from the collection point is too long. If they stick to the original route, the patient will not make it. Walker shifts from hope to calculation. The river bends ahead and carves a blind wall for most lines of sight. On the inside of that bend sits a torn patch of mud that is not a landing zone and might work once. It shortens the carry and keeps the trees between the aircraft and the fire. She builds a new approach in her head. Nap of the earth along the water at low radar altimeter. Flare gates set against the bend. Abort gates marked for drift, torque, and sight picture. Egress traced to the downstream corridor that keeps the canopy between the cabin and the shooters. Systems frame the risk. GPS is degraded. So, embedded GPS and inertial remain the primary reference. Radar altimeter is truth for low level. With the bug set where trees turn to teeth. Communications are terrain masked. So intercom discipline and clean phrasing matter more than volume. Marking stays tight. Infrared strobe will be on only when called. To talk the aircraft onto the new point without painting the sky. Laser talk on will be held until the last minute. Carefully kept off the goggles and out of the cockpit. Red smoke will pop at short final to read wind and nothing else. She lowers the night vision goggle gain until grain softens and breathes in for 4 and out for 4. Kneeboard notes catch the changes, with arrows for the bend and a small star for the micro landing zone. The crew chief catches the plan from the rhythm of her hands and starts clearing straps for a faster load. The younger pilot mirrors the cadence and steadies his scan. Responsibility tightens rather than widens. She keeps the aircraft level, calls the flow, and owns the timing. The pilot backs instruments and radios. The crew chief owns the cabin and the view outside. The handoff is quiet and complete. Ground leadership understands that the landing will live or die on timing and masking. Authority for the moment passes to the pilot in command without a speech. Trust arrives in the space where a new plan meets disciplined hands. The river bend rises ahead like a dark hinge, and Avery Hawk Walker brings the MH-60M down to a crawl at nap of the earth. The radar altimeter holds low as the aircraft hugs the water and lets the canopy hide the profile. She listens to the cadence of fire and chooses the lull between bursts for the final push. Nothing moves fast. Yet, everything arrives right on time. She calls for infrared strobe only when the minutes turn to seconds and then accepts a clean talk onto the point. Laser talk on comes at the last moment and never splashes across the cockpit or the night vision goggles. Red smoke blooms just before short final and tilts to show the wind across the mud. The approach narrows until it feels like a line drawn with a fine pencil. Flare gates meet her eyes, where she mapped them earlier on the kneeboard. She eases aft, cyclic, brings in power with care, and keeps pedals alive to hold heading. Radar altimeter calls flow in a smooth ladder that steps toward Earth. Wheels settle into a patch of torn mud, with no drift and no wasted motion. The cabin turns into purpose. The crew chief moves the litter with quick, compact steps and lock straps without a rattle. Load secure comes as a calm confirmation that frees Walker to watch torque and temperature and keep the aircraft balanced. A short master caution ping flickers when debris stirs, then fades as quickly as it came. Door gunners hold because line of sight is a rumor in the trees. Timing and terrain do the work better than noise. And Walker refuses to trade silence for comfort. The river and the canopy hide the aircraft, while seconds do what bullets cannot. Crew resource management keeps rolls crisp, so that every hand knows it's square on the board. Rotor wash lifts a thin veil of mist and sets it turning in the landing lights. The red smoke stands out against wet green and then thins as the wind reveals itself. The warning tones melt into the background and become part of her focus rather than a reason to fear. What looks effortless is only discipline stacked on discipline until precision feels like grace. The litter is aboard, and the cabin closes. Walker holds the pedals steady and watches the bend that will open the exit. The aircraft is ready to move the instant the moment turns. A master at work has made a place that was never a landing zone feel safe for exactly as long as it needed to be. Wind scuffs the red smoke and tilts it across the mud. Avery Hawk Walker reads a quartering crosswind at short final and files it into the plan. The exit will roll right along the river corridor to keep the canopy as a moving wall. She shapes the next second so the aircraft leaves the ground already pointed at safety. She keeps the rhythm calm on the intercom. Brevity stays tight and clean so no one has to think twice. Crew resource management sets the lanes and holds them. Pilot in command owns lift and timing. Pilot backs instruments and radios. And the crew chief manages the cabin and the picture outside. Ground fire patterns start to repeat. Walker notes a gap on the riverside where suppression would matter most. She tells the ground element to shift bursts toward the bend in 2-second pulses to open the egress angle. The canopy in the water will handle the rest if the timing matches. A hiccup snaps at the left door gun. The feed stutters and the crew chief moves into immediate action without crowding the cabin. He clears the issue with practice steps while keeping one eye on night vision goggles and one ear on callouts. Walker holds power and heading rocks steady so the fix stays safe and quick. The tone from the ground changes as the picture settles. The ground force commander moves from command phrasing to confirmation, accepting that the landing and liftoff live on the pilot's clock. Walker calls the roll right on liftoff. The first turn to the river seam. And the altitude gates for the escape. The team aboard and the team outside align around that sequence as if it had always been there. Inside the aircraft, nothing is wasted. The pilot tracks torque and fuel and repeats the key numbers at natural pauses. The crew chief passes a final ready and settles into a low crouch for the ride out. Walker brings all the pieces into the same beat, so the aircraft and the people move like one thing. Trust arrives without ceremony. The airframe feels lighter when decisions are short and exact. Exposure time in the zone shrinks to what is strictly needed. The crew senses the shift and shares it. A quiet relief that comes when the most qualified voice is the one everyone follows. Last man on becomes a weight that clicks the cabin into place. The crew chief locks the door and gives a calm ready that sounds like a green light in human form. Avery Hawk Walker brings in power with care and lets the wheels rise from the mud without a twitch. The aircraft feels lighter but not free yet. Leaves brush the tail and the air swirls in the pocket behind the rotor. A quick yaw kicks as the flow turns rough and hints at the onset of loss of tail rotor effectiveness. Walker catches it with clean pedal work and adds only the power she needs to hold heading. The nose settles back on track, and the river opens a narrow lane. She sets the order of controls the way she rehearsed it. Cyclic, forward first to build a touch of flow, then collective to climb without sinking into settling with power. Torque stays in limits, and the radar altimeter reads a steady 40 feet. The aircraft rolls right into the egress line that rides the inside of the bend. Tracers chase the sound they think they hear. But the canopy and the river cut the line of sight into fragments. Terrain masking turns the jungle into a shield that moves with the aircraft. The team holds to safe escape speed. Neither slow enough to hang, nor fast enough to outrun judgment. In the cabin, the only voices are numbers and short confirmations. Crew resource management keeps the rhythm true. The pilot tracks fuel, torque, and temperature, and repeats the key values at natural pauses. The crew chief stays low and scans through night vision goggles for threats that might cross the channel. Walker keeps the nose aligned with the water and lets timing do most of the fighting. Relief arrives in a human shape. The ground force commander understands what just happened and sends thanks that does not need punctuation. It folds into the narrative like a nod. Simple and complete. The recognition lands in the quiet where skill and outcome meet. The river dark lifts, and the air loses its damp grip as the aircraft slips out of the trees. The exfil corridor that the regiment scouted ahead lies clean and waiting. And the guard radar calls a clear picture. Warning tones fade to the background, and the rotor wash turns the mist into harmless lace. Walker keeps her eyes on the line where black meets black and rides the seconds as if they are a current she can read and steer. The landing lights touch a quiet pad at a forward arming and refueling point, and the aircraft settles with a small sigh. The crew chief cracks the cabin open, and medics flow in with practiced economy. The litter moves from metal to hands to waiting stretcher without a bump. The air is cooler here, and the noise of the rotors feels like it belongs to another place. Discipline takes over the moment the patient rolls away. The pilot tracks fuel and torque, while the crew chief secures straps and resets the cabin for the next lift. The pilot in command keeps the aircraft alive and safe as ground crews step in with fuel and checks. The rhythm is steady and feels like a return to normal life. Recognition arrives without ceremony. The ground force leader meets the eyes of the pilot in command and nods in a way that carries weight. No one needs to speak because everyone understands what almost happened and what did not. Respect settles in the space where fear used to live. Debrief starts soon after the aircraft is shut down in a corner of the field. The team walks through events in order and measures choices against standard operating procedure. Risk was identified and controlled rather than ignored, and the planned shift was executed inside the box. Crew resource management held firm and kept voices useful and short. The report captures facts more than feelings. Terrain masking worked as intended, and timing beat volume in a canopy fight. The new landing point reduced exposure and cut the carry to care by precious minutes. The escape route held clean once the river took over as a moving shield. Paperwork becomes assignment. Command tasks the detachment with more denied area exfil support in terrain that eats radios and punishes haste. The pilot in command is placed at the center of that team, not for flash, but for results. The lesson is clear and simple and rooted in craft. A quieter truth lives under the formal lines. Years earlier, she arrived 1 minute late to a rescue that shaped the way she flies. Ever since, she has treated time like an enemy that can be read and outmaneuvered. Tonight, that old shadow lifts a little and lets her breathe. The flight line grows still as the refuelers roll away and the last tool clicks back into its pouch. The warning tones die all the way down until there is only the night. The thin mist raised by the rotor wash falls back into the grass and disappears. A streak of red-stained mud on a boot gets brushed away, and the quiet professional walks into the dark with nothing more to prove. The story leaves us with a clear question that only you can answer. Where is the line between following standard operating procedure and trusting instinct when a life depends on seconds in a jungle night? Think about nap of the earth, flight at 40 feet. The way a pilot reads radalt like a heartbeat. And the discipline that keeps a crew inside safe margins. Would you hold the plan to the letter? Or bend the plan to save a person who cannot wait? Share your perspective on how you balance safety, time, and responsibility when every decision carries risk. Tell us whether you would choose a pilot in command who stays calm, precise, and quiet, or a leader who is loud and reactive. Explain what earns your trust when you are strapped into a cabin and the world outside is trying to take it away. Your view helps us build a community that respects skill and judgment in equal measure. If this felt real and respectful to the people who do this work, help the channel grow. Like the video, subscribe for more stories that keep the details right, and pass it to a friend who loves aviation and quiet professionals. In future episodes, we will keep using terms the way crews use them. From terrain masking and IR strobe to laser talk on. From wheels on mud to clean lift. From PC and PI roles to the tasks of a crew chief. Accuracy is how we honor the craft. Before you click away, take a breath and listen to the rotor wash, easing into silence. Let that calm pull you back to the moment when training met courage and made room for hope. Leave a comment with the lesson you are taking into your own life and the question you want us to explore next. We will be here, ready to tell the next story with the same care and gratitude.